The station called Axiom Prime floated at the center of known space like a jewel made of light and metal. It was old, older than most species could remember. The Galactic Concord had built it as a meeting place, a court, a temple to their own greatness. Here, the elder races decided the fate of younger civilizations. Ambassador stepped off the human shuttle and felt small. She was used to feeling small. Every human who left Earth felt it. The galaxy was vast and ancient, and humanity had only just learned to walk among the stars. They were children in a universe of giants. The docking bay stretched upward for what seemed like forever. Ships from 100 worlds rested in their cradles. Some were elegant curves of living crystal. Others were massive high vessels that hummed with the thoughts of millions. And then there was the human shuttle. Gray, blocky, functional. It looked like a rock sitting among diamonds. A creature made of shifting glass approached her. Its body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. This was one of the oldest species in the Concord. They had been building empires when humans were still learning to make fire. "You are the human speaker," they said. Its voice was like wind through crystal chimes. "I am translator. I will guide you to the tribunal." Nodded and followed. She had practiced for this moment her entire life, studied every known species, learned their customs, their histories, their languages. Earth was depending on her. 3 billion people on a dying world looking to the stars for salvation. If she could convince the conquered to grant humanity membership, they would gain access to technologies that could heal their planet. Clean energy, medical advances. The secrets of faster-than-light travel without the crude, dangerous methods humans currently used. If she failed, humanity would remain alone, isolated, slowly dying. The walk to the tribunal chamber took almost an hour. Axiom Prime was not built for creatures who measured their lives in decades. It was built for immortals, for hive minds, for beings who thought nothing of walking for days. By the time reached the great doors, her legs ached and her lungs burned from the thin air. The doors opened, and she stepped into judgment. The tribunal chamber was a bowl of darkness and light. Thousands of seats rose in circles toward a ceiling lost in shadow, and in those seats sat the representatives of the Galactic Concord. Saw the crystalline in one section, their bodies glowing softly. She saw the chorus of a hive-mind species that moved as one, thousands of small bodies forming patterns like flocks of birds. She saw the supremacy of massive creatures with armored shells and eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. And they all looked at her with the same expression, contempt. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform, sat the High Arbiter. Was ancient even by standards. Its crystalline body had grown complex over, fractals within fractals, light bending through it in ways that hurt to watch. Human spoke, and its voice filled the chamber without effort. "You come before the tribunal of voices to petition for membership in the Galactic Concord. Speak your case." Walk to the center of the floor. A single spotlight found her, making her feel even smaller than before. She took a breath and began. "Honored members of the Concord," she said, "humanity comes before you in humility and hope. We are young, we know this. We have much to learn from those who came before us, but we believe we have something to offer as well, our curiosity, our determination, our ability to adapt and grow." She spoke for an hour. She talked about human art and music, about their sciences and philosophies, about their dreams of reaching the stars not for conquest but for connection. She gave the best speech of her life. When she finished, silence filled the chamber. Then the whispers began. They spread through the seats like wind through grass, did not need to understand the words to know what they were saying. High Arbiter raised a crystalline limb, and silence returned. "The tribunal has heard your petition," said. "We have studied your species for some time now, your history, your nature, your potential." Felt hope rising in her chest. "The petition is—" The words hit her like a physical blow. She stood frozen, unable to speak. "Humanity is not ready for the conquered," continued. Perhaps humanity will never be ready. You are a species born in violence. Your history is written in blood. Even now, you war among yourselves. You destroy your own world. You are predators wearing the mask of civilization, and we will not invite predators into our house." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Saw the representatives nodding, their alien faces showing satisfaction. "Return to your world, human," said. "Return when you have evolved beyond your barbarity, if such a thing is even possible for your kind." Wanted to argue, wanted to scream that they were wrong, that humanity was more than its worst moments. But she knew it would change nothing. The elder races had made their judgment long before she arrived. This hearing had been a formality, a show. She turned to leave, her legs heavy, her heart heavier. The spotlight followed her like a mockery. And then she heard it. Music, soft and distant, playing through hidden speakers in the walls. A hymn of some kind, sung in a language she had never heard before. It was part of the ceremony, she realized. A traditional closing. But something about it caught her attention, made her slow her steps, made her listen. The language was strange, alien in every way, and yet something about its structure felt familiar. Not the words, but the patterns beneath them, the mathematics of how the sounds connected. She had spent her life studying languages, and her brain could not help but analyze what it heard. There was an error in the hymn, a tonal mistake that broke the pattern. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. Before she knew what she was doing, whispered a correction, just a few syllables spoken under her breath. The music stopped. The whispers stopped. Everything stopped. Turned around slowly. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. The representatives who had looked at her with contempt now looked at her with something else entirely. Fear. High Arbiter rose from its seat, its crystalline body trembling in a way had never seen before. "What did you say?" The voice was barely a whisper now. "What language did you just speak?" Did not understand. She had only corrected a small mistake, a simple linguistic error. "Answer me, human," demanded, and now its voice shook with something that sounded almost like terror. "How do you know the tongue of the architects?" Stood alone in the center of the tribunal chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and she had no idea what she had just done. But she knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. The next 3 days were chaos. Was not allowed to leave Axiom Prime. She was not arrested exactly, but guards followed her everywhere. Soldiers with bodies like walking diamonds stood outside her quarters at all hours. No one would tell her what was happening, but she could feel the fear in the air like electricity before a storm. Messages flooded in from Earth. Confused, panicked messages from her government demanding to know what she had done. She could not answer them because she did not know herself. On the 4th day, they came for her. The guards led her through corridors she had not seen before, deeper into Axiom Prime, past sections that looked ancient beyond measure. The walls here were made of a black metal that seemed to eat light. Strange symbols covered every surface, and felt a chill run down her spine when she realized she recognized some of them. They brought her to a smaller chamber, nothing like the grand tribunal hall. This room was simple, almost bare. A table sat in the center, and around it waited representatives from a dozen species. High Arbiter was there, along with leaders recognized from her studies. The elder of the chorus, the supreme commander of others whose names she did not know. And sitting alone at the far end of the table was a human. Doctor, Earth's leading expert in alien languages. Knew him by reputation but had never met him in person. He was old, his hair white, his face lined with decades of work, but his eyes were sharp and alive. "Sit down," Ambassador said. There was no contempt in its voice now, only something that sounded almost like respect. "We have much to discuss." Sat beside Doctor. He gave her a small nod but did not speak. "3 days ago," began, "you spoke words in the sacred tongue of the architects. You corrected an error in the hymn of awakening, an error that has existed for over 1 million years. None of our scholars ever noticed it. How did you know? Shook her head. I don't know. I heard the pattern and I just knew something was wrong. It was instinct. Instinct, the Supreme Commander of repeated. Its voice was deep and rumbling like stones grinding together. You speak the language of gods on instinct. I study languages, said. All languages. My brain is trained to find patterns. I heard a broken pattern and I fixed it. I did not know what I was saying. The room fell silent. The alien leaders looked at each other with expressions could not read. Doctor cleared his throat. Perhaps I can explain. Nodded, speak, human scholar. Doctor stood, and despite his age, he moved with confidence. The architects vanished 3 million years ago. They left behind ruins, technologies, and the hymns that all your species sing. You have been studying their language, which you call for all that time, but you have never truly understood it. You memorize the sounds, but you cannot think in the patterns. Is this correct? This is known, admitted. The tongue of the architects is beyond full understanding. We preserve it as holy tradition. And that is exactly the problem, Doctor said. Your species unified long ago. Each of you has one language, one way of thinking. Your minds became efficient but also rigid. You cannot see clearly because you only have one lens to view it through. He began to pace, his excitement building. Humanity is different. We never unified. We have thousands of languages. At our peak, we had over 7,000 distinct tongues, each one a different way of encoding reality. Different grammar, different sounds, different logic. Our minds are trained from birth to think in multiple patterns. What does this have to do with the sacred tongue? The elder of the chorus asked. It spoke with many voices at once, a strange harmony. Everything, Doctor said. He pressed a button and images appeared floating above the table. Ancient Earth writing systems, Sanskrit symbols, Chinese characters, African click languages. When we first discovered the architect ruins and began studying we noticed something impossible. The patterns were familiar. He pointed to the images. These root sounds appear in Proto-Indo-European, the ancestor of many human languages. These tonal structures match ancient Chinese. These grammatical forms exist in languages from Africa, Australia, the Americas. Pieces of are scattered throughout human linguistic history. The chamber erupted in noise. Protests, denials, accusations raised a limb for silence. You are saying the architects visited your world? Asked. I am saying more than that, Doctor replied. The architects came to Earth when humanity was young. They found a species whose minds were still plastic, still changing, and they planted seeds, fragments of their language scattered across our cultures. Each fragment contained a piece of the whole. He brought up more images, star maps, ancient cave paintings, religious texts. Our ancestors did not understand what they were given. They absorbed these fragments into their own languages, their own myths. The pieces became hidden, diluted, separated by oceans and centuries, but they never disappeared. And now, asked quietly. Now we have gathered the pieces back together, Doctor said. For the first time in 3 million years, beings exist who can see Earth from multiple angles, who can think in its patterns because we learned those patterns before we knew what they meant. Ambassador corrected your hymn because her brain, trained in over 40 human languages, could see the broken pattern that your scholars missed for 1 million years. Silence filled the room again, but this silence was different. It was the silence of minds struggling to accept something that changed everything they believed. The Supreme Commander spoke first. This is impossible. It is a trick, a deception. Then test us, Doctor said simply. Bring your most ancient texts, your most difficult translations. We will show you what we can see. Over the next several hours, they did exactly that. The elder species brought forward fragments of architect writing that had puzzled their scholars for ages. Symbols no one could read. Devices no one could activate. texts no one could translate. And Doctor worked together, combining their knowledge of human languages, finding the hidden patterns. It was difficult, exhausting, but piece by piece, meaning emerged from the ancient symbols. By the end, even the Supreme Commander could not deny what it was seeing. "The architects chose you," the elder of the chorus said, its voices filled with wonder. "Of all the species in the galaxy, they chose humanity." "They did not choose us," said. She was tired, but she needed them to understand. "They gave us tools, nothing more. We are not special. We are not holy. We are just different, and sometimes different is what is needed." High Arbiter stood slowly, its crystalline body catching the light in new ways. "3 days ago, I called your species barbarians. I was wrong. I spoke from ignorance and arrogance." It lowered its head, a gesture recognized as the deepest form of apology. "I ask your forgiveness." Nodded, given freely. But even as she spoke, she saw the Supreme Commander of rising from its seat, its armored body rigid with fury. "I do not accept this," the Supreme Commander declared. "The supremacy has devoted our civilization to the architects for 3 million years. We will not be pushed aside by animals who stumbled into knowledge they do not deserve." It turned and marched from the chamber, its guards following behind. Watched it go with worry in its ancient eyes. "This is not over," it said quietly. "The supremacy will not accept what has happened here. They will see humanity as a threat to everything they believe." Doctor nodded gravely. "Then we must move quickly. There is much more to discover, and I fear we have little time." Looked at the ancient symbols still floating above the table, the language of beings who had walked among the stars when the galaxy was young. Humanity had been given a gift beyond measure. But gifts, she knew, often came with a price. She could only hope they were ready to pay it. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within weeks, every civilization knew what had happened at Axiom Prime. The barbarian species from a small planet called Earth could speak the tongue of the architects. They could read the ancient texts. They could understand what the elder races had failed to understand for 3 million years. The reaction was not what expected. Some species fell to their knees, literally. On a dozen worlds, religious movements exploded overnight. Humanity was declared the inheritors, the chosen ones, the living connection to the divine architects. Ships filled with pilgrims began traveling toward Earth, desperate to touch the sacred beings who spoke the tongue of the gods. Other species reacted with rage. The supremacy of had built their entire civilization on the belief that they were the architects' true successors. They had temples on 1,000 worlds, priests who had devoted their immortal lives to studying every scrap of architect knowledge. And now they were being told that primitive apes had surpassed them all. The supremacy called it heresy, lies, a galactic conspiracy against their righteous claims. And then they began to act. Was walking through the gardens of Axiom Prime when the first assassin struck. The gardens were beautiful, filled with plants from 100 worlds, a peaceful place where she often went to think. She did not see the creature hiding among the flowers until it was almost too late. It moved like liquid shadow, flowing toward her faster than her eyes could follow. She caught only a glimpse of claws and teeth before instinct took over. She threw herself sideways, crashing through a bush of glowing alien flowers. The claws missed her throat by inches. Her guards were too far away. She could hear them shouting, running toward her, but they would not arrive in time. The shadow creature came at her again, and this time there was nowhere to run. Then Doctor appeared from nowhere, moving with speed that seemed impossible for a man his age. He threw something at the creature, a small device that burst into blinding light. The shadow creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and dissolved into smoke. Lay among the ruined flowers, her heart pounding, trying to understand what had just happened. Doctor helped her up. His hands were steady, but his eyes were grim. "A shade," he said, Supremacy assassins, very expensive, very effective, usually. He looked at the fatting smoke where the creature had been. They are not playing games anymore. After that was never alone. Guards surrounded her at all times. Doctor stayed close, and she learned that the old scholar had skills beyond linguistics. He had spent decades working in dangerous parts of the galaxy, and he knew how to survive. But they both knew that guards and skills would not be enough. The Supremacy had resources beyond counting. If they wanted humanity dead, they would find a way. The only solution was to move faster, to find something that would make the Supremacy pause, something that would change the balance of power. The answer lay on a dead world called Remnant VII. The planet had once been a center of architect civilization. Great cities had covered its surface, filled with technologies that modern species could only dream of. But 3 million years had reduced everything to ruins. The cities were dust. The technologies were silent. Except for one facility, a massive structure of black metal that had resisted time itself. No one had ever been able to enter it. The doors would not open. The machines inside would not respond. Scholars had studied it for centuries without success. But a doctor believed they could change that. Their ship landed on Remnant VII under heavy guard. A fleet of vessels surrounded them, protection against any Supremacy attack. High Arbiter had thrown its full support behind the humans, a decision that had divided the conquered. The walk to the facility took hours across a landscape of gray dust and fallen towers, felt the weight of history pressing down on her. 3 million years ago, beings had walked these same paths. Beings who had seeded Earth with the fragments of their language. Beings who had changed the destiny of humanity before humans even existed. The facility rose before them like a black mountain. Its walls were smooth and perfect, unmarked by the ages that had destroyed everything around it. A single door stood at the base, sealed shut. Doctor approached it slowly, reverently. He had spent his entire life dreaming of this moment. "The inscriptions above the door," he said, pointing. "They are a challenge, a password of sorts. The scholars who came before tried every combination of words they knew. None of them worked. Because they did not truly speak the language," said quietly. "They only repeated sounds they had memorized." "Exactly." Doctor took a deep breath. "I have been working on this phrase for 30 years. It is constructed from fragments of human languages. Sanskrit, Sumerian, the Khoisan-Click languages of Africa, the tonal patterns of ancient Chinese. It is the most complete sentence in true that any human has ever created." Touched his arm. "Are you ready?" He smiled, and for a moment he looked like a young man again. "I have been ready my entire life." Doctor faced the door and spoke. The words were unlike anything had ever heard. They seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to something deeper in her mind. Sounds that were also mathematics. Patterns that were also meaning. A language that operated on levels human speech could only approximate. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door began to glow. Lines of light spread across its surface, tracing patterns that matched the symbols in the ancient texts. The black metal hummed with awakening power. And then, with a sound like the universe taking a breath, the door opened. Light poured out from within, warm and golden, as if the facility had been waiting to share its treasures with someone worthy. But that was not all. A voice spoke from the light. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was vast and patient and somehow kind. "You have spoken the words of opening," the voice said. "After 3 million years of waiting, the inheritors have finally arrived." And Doctor looked at each other, then stepped forward into the light. Behind them, the guards fell to their knees in worship. Above them, the guard fleet detected a massive energy surge from the planet's surface and scrambled to understand what was happening. And far across the galaxy, on a warship heading toward Remnant VII, the Supreme Commander of received the report and felt something it had not felt in centuries. Fear. The humans had awakened something, something old, something powerful, and suddenly assassins and fleets did not seem like enough anymore. The Supreme Commander began to pray to the architects for guidance. But it was starting to realize, with growing horror, that the architects might have stopped listening to the supremacy long ago. The inside of the facility was not what expected. She had imagined dusty halls and silent machines, ancient technology waiting in darkness. Instead, she found herself standing in a garden that should not exist. Trees with silver leaves grew toward a ceiling that looked like open sky. Streams of clear water flowed between beds of flowers that glowed with soft light. The air smelled of life and growing things. "This is impossible," Doctor whispered. "Nothing should be alive here after 3 million years." "Time moves differently within these walls," the voice said. "It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I have kept this place waiting for you, a small corner of what once was." They walked deeper into the garden, following a path of white stones. At the center, they found a figure made of light. It had no fixed shape, shifting constantly between forms that were sometimes humanoid and sometimes something else entirely. "I am the caretaker," the figure said. "The architects created me to wait, to watch, to guide those who would one day inherit their works." Found her voice. The architects, everyone speaks of them like gods. What were they really? The caretaker's light pulsed gently. They were seekers, learners. They traveled the young galaxy when most stars had not yet formed, searching for meaning in an empty universe. They found many species rising toward intelligence. They helped when they could, watched when they could not. "The elder races," Doctor said. "Though the chorus of the supremacy of, they claim the architects created them." "They claim wrong," the caretaker replied. "The architects found them already growing. They taught them, shared knowledge with them, gave them the hymns and the sacred texts, but they did not create them." The figure moved closer, and felt warmth washing over her like sunlight. "The architects searched for something specific, something rare. They called it the gift of patterns, the ability to truly think in not merely speak it, to understand the language not as sounds but as a way of seeing reality itself. And they never found it in the elder races," said slowly. "No," there was sadness in the caretaker's voice. "The elder species were too old by the time the architects found them. Their minds had already settled into fixed shapes. They could learn by rote, memorize the sounds and symbols, but they could never truly think in its patterns. The language requires flexibility. It requires minds that can hold multiple truths at once, see from many angles, change and grow." Doctor nodded, understanding blooming on his face. The elder races unified too early. Single languages, single ways of thinking, efficient but rigid. "Yes, and so the architects kept searching. They visited thousands of worlds, studying young species, looking for the gift. Most did not have it. Their minds were too similar, too settled, too uniform." The caretaker turned to face them directly, and for a moment thought she saw something like pride in its shifting light. Then they found Earth. Images appeared in the air around them. Earth as it had been hundreds of thousands of years ago. Small groups of humans scattered across the planet. Different groups, different climates, different ways of living. "Your species was chaos," the caretaker said. "Fragmented, divided. You warred with each other, competed for resources, split into countless tribes with countless languages. By every measure the architects had used before, you should have been failures. But we weren't," said. "You were exactly what they were searching for." The images showed human ancestors gathering around fires, speaking to each other in different tongues. "Your chaos was your strength. Every time you divided, you created new ways of thinking. New languages, new grammars, new logic. Your mind stayed plastic, flexible. You never settled into one pattern because you were always creating new ones." The caretaker showed them more images, architects walking among ancient humans, teaching, learning, sharing fragments of their language. They could not give you directly. Your minds were too young, your languages too simple, but they could plant seeds, fragments hidden in the tongues of different tribes. Each fragment contained a piece of the whole. The architects knew that one day, if humanity survived, those fragments would come together again. Why did they leave? Doctor asked. Where did they go? They did not leave in the way you imagine. The caretaker's form shifted, becoming something vast and complex. The architects evolved beyond physical form. They ascended to a state of being that has no words even in They became part of the fabric of reality itself. Felt her mind struggling to grasp what she was hearing. They became gods. That word is insufficient, but it is the closest your current understanding allows. The caretaker returned to a simpler form. Before their ascension, they left behind their works, their knowledge, their purpose. Everything they had built was meant to be inherited by those who could truly understand it. And that inheritance was always meant for humanity, asked. The inheritance was meant for whoever proved worthy, whoever could truly speak whoever could think in its patterns. The caretaker moved closer to her. For 3 million years I waited. Species rose and fell. The elder races built empires and the architects without understanding them. They preserved the hymns as sacred relics while missing their true meaning. And I waited. Until now, Doctor said quietly. Until now. The caretaker's light brightened with joy. You have come. You have spoken the words of opening. You have proven that the seeds planted so long ago have finally grown into something wonderful. Around them, the garden began to change. The plants parted to reveal machines hidden beneath. Screens flickered to life showing star maps and technologies, and knowledge beyond anything could imagine. This facility is only the beginning, the caretaker said. Across the galaxy, thousands of architect installations wait in silence. Power sources, ship factories, libraries of knowledge, weapons capable of protecting entire star systems. All of them have been waiting for the same command, the command that only true speakers of can give. Doctor looked at the machines with wonder and fear in his eyes. This is too much. We are not ready for this power. No one is ever ready for their inheritance, the caretaker replied gently. But readiness is not the requirement. Understanding is. And you understand, Doctor. You have dedicated your life to understanding. That is what the architects valued above all else. Thought about the supremacy fleet heading toward them. The wars that would follow if humanity claimed this inheritance alone. The fear and anger of species who had the architects for millions of years. We do not want to rule the galaxy, she said. We did not come here seeking power. I know, the caretaker said. That is why you are worthy. The architects did not build their works for conquerors. They built them for teachers, for those who would share understanding rather than hoard it. It gestured and more images appeared. The elder species struggling with Earth for millions of years, never quite grasping it, never quite understanding. The elder races could not learn the tongue because they had no teachers, the caretaker said. They had only texts and hymns, words without context, but you can teach them. Your minds can bridge the gap between their rigid patterns and the flexibility of You can do what the architects themselves could not. You can help the elder races truly understand. Felt tears forming in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of what was being offered. Not power over others, but responsibility for them. This is the testament of the architects, the caretaker said. Their final message for whoever inherited their works. You were never meant to replace the elder races. You were meant to help them grow, to teach them what they could not learn alone, to lift the galaxy toward something greater than any single species could achieve. Dr. Took's hand. His own eyes were wet with tears. We need to tell the others, he said. All of them, even the supremacy. Nodded, especially the supremacy. The caretaker watched them with something like love in its shifting light. Then let us begin, it said. There is much work to do. Outside, the Supremacy Fleet was approaching. Soon there would be demands and threats and the possibility of war, but was no longer afraid. They had been given a gift, not a weapon to conquer but a light to share, and she knew with absolute certainty that this was what the architects had always intended. Humanity had not been chosen to rule the stars. They had been chosen to teach. The Supremacy Fleet arrived like a wall of death. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded Remnant VII. Each ship was massive, built for destruction, carrying weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. The Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the small human vessel and its escorts with cold satisfaction. "Attention, heretics," the Supreme Commander broadcast on all frequencies. "You have violated the sacred grounds of the architects. You have awakened technologies that belong to the rightful inheritors. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." On the planet's surface, heard the message through the facility's systems. Around her, the caretaker's machines hummed with power. Doctor stood beside her, his face calm despite the death hanging over them. "We cannot fight a fleet like that," said. "We have knowledge but no weapons." "You have more than you realize," the caretaker replied. "But violence is not the answer. Violence is what the architects rejected. It is why they ascended beyond physical form in the first place." Doctor touched one of the machines gently. "Then what do we do? Try to negotiate." "You do what the architects did when they faced impossible situations." The caretaker's light pulsed warmly. "You speak, and you make them listen." Understood. She had been an ambassador before any of this began. Words were her weapons. Understanding was her strength. "Can you broadcast my voice to every ship in that fleet?" she asked. "I can do more than that," the caretaker said. "I can broadcast your voice to every architect installation in the galaxy. Are you ready to speak not just to a fleet, but to the universe itself?" Took a deep breath. She thought about everything she had learned, the seeds planted on Earth thousands of generations ago, the chaos of human languages that had preserved what the unified elder races had lost, the gift that had never been meant for conquest. "I am ready," she said. The caretaker did something to the machines and suddenly felt connected to something vast. She could sense the other installations awakening across the galaxy. Thousands of them, millions, all waiting for her words. She began to speak in not the fragments she had spoken before, not the partial phrases that Doctor had reconstructed over decades. The caretaker had given her something more, a full understanding, downloaded directly into her mind. For the first time in 3 million years, a living being spoke the tongue of the architects with complete fluency. Her words spread across space like ripples on water. On the Supremacy flagship, every speaker and screen suddenly carried her voice. The Supreme Commander roared for silence, but the systems would not obey. On worlds across the galaxy, ancient machines that had been silent for ages suddenly activated. Screens lit up in forgotten temples. Voices echoed in ruins that had not heard sound in centuries. The architects had built a network spanning the stars and was using it to reach everyone at once. "I speak to all who can hear," she said, her voice carrying an and translating itself into every known language. I am human, and I bring a message from those who walked among the stars before any of us were born." On his bridge, the Supreme Commander went very still. He understood better than most. He had dedicated his life to studying it, and he recognized with growing shock that this human was not just speaking the sacred tongue. She was thinking in it. "The architects did not choose humanity to rule over you," continued. "They did not mark us as superior or more worthy. They simply gave us a task, a responsibility. We preserved fragments of their language because our minds were young enough to hold them. We can speak their tongue because we never stopped fracturing and changing and growing." Images began to appear alongside her words. The caretaker was broadcasting the testament, showing the galaxy what the architects had truly intended. The architects wanted understanding, not worship. They wanted their knowledge to spread, not to be hoarded in temples, and they saw that the elder races, despite all their wisdom and power, could not achieve this alone. Your mind settled long ago, became strong but rigid. You needed help. The Supreme Commander found his voice. Lies, blasphemy. The supremacy has devoted 3 million years to the architects. You have devoted 3 million years to worshipping shadows, replied gently. And I do not say this to hurt you. I say it because it is time for the shadows to end. It is time for true understanding to begin. She spoke the next words with all the authority the architects had left behind. I call upon the architect installations of the galaxy. Awaken. Show yourselves. Let those who have waited in faith see what their faith has protected. Across known space it happened. On a mountain that had been sacred for longer than memory suddenly opened. Light poured from within, and machines that had never moved began to hum with power. In the heart of the chorus of a structure that the hive mind had built around without understanding suddenly came alive. Knowledge began to flow through their network, patterns they had never seen before. And on the holiest world of the supremacy, in the temple where the Supreme Commander had trained as a young priest, the altar split open to reveal an architect installation that had been hidden beneath it all along. Everywhere the inheritance awakened. The Supreme Commander watched his screens showing reports from across supremacy space, installations activating, ancient machines coming to life, the very foundations of their faith revealing secrets they had never imagined. You can destroy us, said, and her voice was kind now. Your fleet has the power, we cannot stop you, but you would only be destroying messengers. The message itself is already spreading. The inheritance is awakening everywhere. The choice before you is simple. You can reject what the architects actually wanted and cling to what you thought they wanted. Or you can accept that faith, true faith, requires the courage to grow. Silence stretched across the fleet. The Supreme Commander stood frozen, his great armored body trembling with emotions he could not name. Doctor spoke for the first time, his voice carried by the architect network alongside. We are not here to take your place. We are here to help you understand. Humanity learned because our minds were shaped to learn. But we can teach. We can bridge the gap between your patterns and the patterns of the architects. Together, we can achieve what none of us could alone. On worlds across the galaxy, beings of 100 species listened, some with fear, some with hope, some with anger that would take time to fade. But all of them listened. The Supreme Commander slowly lowered himself into his command seat. His officers watched him, waiting for orders. Attack, retreat, surrender. Stand down, he said quietly. His voice sounded old, older than it ever had before. All weapons stand down. His officers hesitated. Supreme Commander. I have spent my entire life serving the architects, he said. I thought I knew what they wanted. I was wrong. He looked at his screens, showing the awakening installations, the knowledge finally being revealed. I will not compound that wrong with violence against their chosen messengers. He rose again and faced the screens that showed his image. Human, he said, ambassador, I do not understand all that is happening. I do not know if I can accept what you are saying, but I am willing to listen. I am willing to learn. Felt tears on her cheeks again. That is all the architects ever wanted from any of us. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The Galactic Concord was reformed, with humanity taking a seat not as rulers but as teachers. Linguistic scholars from Earth traveled to every corner of the galaxy, working with alien students to help them understand in ways they never had before. It was slow work, difficult work. The elder races had spent millions of years thinking in certain patterns, and changing those patterns was painful. Some refused, some could not, but many tried, and little by little understanding grew. The architect technologies revealed themselves fully, not as weapons of conquest but as tools for healing, for building, for connecting species that had been isolated by the vast distances between stars. Humanity did not claim these tools for themselves. They shared them, taught others how to use them, just as the architects had intended. Stood before the new tribunal, no longer a petitioner begging for acceptance. She was a founder now, a bridge between what the galaxy had been and what it could become. High Arbiter stood beside her, its crystalline body shining with colors had never seen before, colors that appeared only when it experienced profound joy. "We were wrong about your species," said. "We called you barbarians. We thought your chaos was weakness." "It was weakness," replied, "and strength, both at the same time. That is what it means to be human." The chamber was filled with representatives of species that had been enemies for millions of years, and supremacy, Chorus and countless others, all of them united for the first time around a common purpose. Stepped forward to speak the closing words of the ancient hymn, the words that no one had ever understood before, the words that completed a message left unfinished for 3 million years. She spoke in and this time, everyone in the chamber understood, not just the sounds but the meaning beneath them. "We were never your gods," she said. "We were your first students. Now learn with us, grow with us. The universe is vast and we have only just begun to speak." The chamber erupted, not in the contemptuous silence that had greeted humanity's first appearance, not in the fearful whispers that had followed her accidental correction of the hymn, but in something that had never happened in that ancient chamber before. Applause. Species that had never agreed on anything applauded together. The sound echoed through Axiom Prime, through the Architect Network, across the galaxy itself. Doctor found in the crowd afterward, his old face bright with wonder. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." Took his hand and looked out at the impossible scene before them. Enemies becoming allies, ancient barriers falling, a galaxy beginning to learn how to speak with one voice while celebrating 1,000 different tongues. "No," she said softly, "we have only just begun." And across the stars, in installations awakening for the first time in 3 million years, the architect machines hummed with satisfaction. Their children had finally come home, and the real work could now begin.